I want to talk about higher education and how it may play a positive role in terms of job or workforce readiness, entrepreneurship, international development. What are some of the contribution higher education has in terms of preparing people for workforce, entrepreneurship, international development, and so on?
Well, I think you have a couple of different, I mean, the answer to that question is just multiple. But a few things that I can point, because I think higher education is really critical for preparing students to enter the workforce, for them to just thrive in their lives and careers. And that's not just young people, but education, higher education is a lifelong endeavor. And can even help throughout the lifetime in terms of helping individuals make transitions from different career paths, and so forth. So this is a really fundamental and foundational aspect of life that I think can be so helpful at different periods. There's of course the very specific professional, relational things from what you study in higher education to where you go in your career. And I think that's, of course, one aspect of higher education. But there are so many other aspects that of what you receive from a higher education that you take with you throughout the rest of your life, into your career, into whatever entrepreneurial endeavors you might do, even into your personal life. This is things I've mentioned before, like critical thinking and asking questions, and the kind of interpersonal relationships that are harder than anybody thinks, communication, adaptability. These kinds of things are all part of the higher education experience, and they're kind of bolstered by specific experiences that one can have through higher education. In my field, we argue that something like education abroad or global engagement in some way are a high impact practice that can help you gain those kinds of skills even faster or in a more deep way, that help you, again, in your career, but also in other aspects of your life. When you think about, and you, AZ, have experiences of going to another country and having to adapt, to learn another language, to deal with your time in a new way, to kind of have that maturation process happen in this very quick and deep way. Those are all things that you take with you for the rest of your life into your career. I think about the skills that I have as an entry-level person all the way up to being a leader, and all of them come back to these slightly more intangible skills like adaptability, working in teams, communicating with others, that I really attribute to my time at college and university, as well as specifically to my education abroad experiences.
You brought an important point, which reminds me of why I wrote a book called Softer Skills That Make or Break Your Success.
Yeah.
As an IT guy, as a researcher, I was good at technical stuff. I do research. I know how to troubleshoot. I was great in terms of dealing with computer servers, but I was struggling with humans because I lacked softer skills. And once I worked on my softer skills and I could be able to see the change, and then I said, you know what, I have to write this book. What you mentioned about all of these softer skills that you mentioned, adaptability, communication, empathy, emotional intelligence, all of these things are important, and higher education should help students to be ready for work. Because if you think about it, the statistics is very shocking. It says that 85% success comes from softer skills and attitude. Only 15% comes from know-how and technical skills. And I have seen it all the time. And I remember a research that I saw, which says that within the first 18 months, first hires, 46% of first hires were fired in that research.
Wow.
Within 18 months, 46% of them. Out of 46% of them, 89% of them were fired because of lack of attitude, soft skills. Only 11% because of lack of technical skills. And if you think about it, somebody could be able to quickly learn how, for example, in my case, within a day, I could be able to format Word and could be able to edit my own Word. That was fine. But developing communication skill, adaptability, crossing cultures, and having cultural intelligence, it may take you years. And the best place to help people to be ready for the work, ready for innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship is on the side of technical skills. They should be empowered on how to communicate in front of the camera, how to communicate with people from other cultures, other backgrounds, stuff like that. Let me ask you this question. In terms of higher education, I just want to know where the focus is. I have my own intuition, a little bit exposure, but you are in the midst of higher education. Do you think the focus is more on technical overall, on average, when you look at higher educations, are they more focused on technical skills, or do you think they're balancing between soft skills, leadership skills with technical know-how and skills from your personal assessment?
It's a good question, and my answer can only be really anecdotal, like you say, just on my own observations. I do think that it is more focused on the technical, just because there is that race to make sure that the return on investment pans out for a student, that they're what they're paying for, especially in the United States with this higher education, that does see some results in terms of getting a job. And I think there is a lot of focus on the technical skills related to what you need. I think that's probably also exacerbated within more of the STEM fields and the STEM disciplines, whereas within the humanities, it is, of course, also technical skills in terms of your knowledge, but it is natural within those disciplines to also be infusing some of these more like softer skills, like critical thinking and communication and so forth. I think that I have seen some good examples of, especially in STEM disciplines, more of the humanities or more of these soft skills being infused, but maybe not on as much of a large scale as we might want to see. And I think in general, higher education institutions would do themselves a favor by being a little more intentional about how those softer skills are being infused into the curriculum and into just the higher education experience in general. Because like you said, I'm not saying it's easy to learn all the technical sides of things, but I'd say it's even harder to learn some of these, quote, softer skills that I would argue aren't soft skills at all. They're the really hard ones.
Yeah. That's the challenge I had when I was coming up with the title of the book. A lot of people gave me feedback. Actually, these skills are harder than the technical skills. But overall, we understand when we say softer skill, people understand what I mean. That's why I kept that title. But you're right. When I research and see what kind of skill sets corporations and the marketplace looking for, always the top 10, all of those skill sets that you mentioned, they're the top 10, like critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, emotional intelligence, communication. When you look at there, you don't see like AI knowledge or computer knowledge. They are important, but many, I would say most organizations, if you present to them two people who are qualified, who have the same qualification in terms of academics, in terms of technical skills, I'm sure they will take the person who has more non-technical skills, soft skills, intangible skills, human skills. And if I want to help my students to get ready and succeed in the workplace, if I have to do extracurricular components of my curriculum, I should add those. I remember when I was traveling to Ethiopia, it was a couple of years ago, and I was talking to, I don't mention the name of the organization, but they are one of the largest private universities that do healthcare. They invited me to speak to the doctors, the nurses about soft skills. And when
Mm.
I talked to them, the leadership, they realized that many of their graduates struggle when they go out, having some legal issues. They're great in terms of treating the patients, handling people in terms of overcoming disease, stress, stuff like that. What they struggled was handling the emotions of their patients. They
Yes.
were, some of them didn't have that emotional connection with their patients
Mhm.
and mistreating people unintentionally. And they were having so many complaints, so many legal complications. And they say, you know what, we need to work on this one. They invited me to provide
Mm.
keynote and then also to provide a 2 day workshop. And I'm sure many higher educations by now understand the importance of these intangible human and softer skills. And I'm glad that you say that these are important to contribute towards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think they only get more important as you grow in your career, as you take on more management and leadership roles, as you know well in your work. I
Yep.
think,
Yep.
it's one thing to kind of be good on the technical level and do some, kind of your basic work, but as you grow in responsibility, that only means working with more and more people and humans, and that
Yep.
only means that you are required to be that much more, emotionally intelligent and self-aware and empathetic, and all of the great things that we know about good leaders. And that's stuff that I don't know if you can really teach. I think a lot of it has to come through experiences, but there's an intentionality that you can add in there, that higher ed institutions can add in there, whether it's specific experiences that students should have on campus, or whether it's supporting more education abroad experiences. I think those are the places where you really build up those leadership skills.
Yeah, definitely. There are some self-assessments. If students take some of the self-assessments,
Yeah.
at least like you mentioned, to have self-awareness, to understand their preferences, their styles, and to understand that people have different styles, preferences, and also if they send them to the world, to the outside world, to communicate and give them assignments, for example, to tackle some of the customer service issues
Mhm.
or something like that. You're right. It should be practical. I mean, you cannot teach someone, yeah, you give them some tools, frameworks, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, they have to go out and practice. And it takes years. But the
Yeah.
students should have that platform initially to start to develop that, because I meet a lot of people. I see them. I can give you so many examples. I go out to provide trainings to some government agencies, corporations, and I meet some people and they tell me that, oh my gosh, especially when they see that I'm an immigrant and they see me providing these softer skills leadership trainings, they
Mhm.
ask me, how come you could be able to do that? And they tell me that they couldn't be able to climb the corporate ladder. They couldn't be able to influence and so on. My question always has been, have you worked on your communication? Have
Mhm.
you taken some leadership roles, some voluntary work?
Right.
Because you won't be able to be promoted. You won't be given platforms. I'm sure you are promoted and given these higher level executive roles. I believe you have the technical abilities and skills about higher education, but I'm sure the people who promoted you, gave you these higher executive level roles, they know your emotional intelligence, your
Mhm.
communication. All of these are softer skills and leadership skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, the big not secret about my career path is that I am in this field of international higher education, but I've actually never worked at a university. And at some point in my career, I felt kind of insecure about that it was a big gap. And I still think it's something that I wish I had under my belt. I wish I had had that experience. But like you say, it's that kind of slight shortcoming is, I think, more than made up for through other skills of what I have been able to do, which is talk to people, listen, try to develop a bigger understanding of the higher education experience through active listening, through research, through just having like one-on-one conversations, visiting campuses all over the world, and kind of working to connect the dots and aggregate all that information in my head to develop my own, perspectives and lived experiences about higher education that aren't equal to having worked on a campus, but I think provide a different type of offering in my role.
In the past, I worked with researchers, and when I look at the leaders of these researchers, the top one, the leaders one, many of them, they never actually wrote peer-reviewed journals. They didn't. But what I see is they're good in communication. They know how to build a team. They know how to connect with people. And those off-chart scientists, researchers, they always put these guys actually at the first row as the main author. They don't do the technical stuff, but they put them at the front. And the other technically expert researchers and scientists, they become co-authors. And when these papers are presented on major platforms, those guys who didn't do the technical stuff, but they know how to communicate that. They have a name, they have a brand, they have connection, partnership, and they are the one presenting those papers. And I was sitting there, seeing that. I said, oh my gosh. I saw the difference. I said, you know what? I have enough technical skills. Now this is time to focus more on what pays the bill, what gives you more platform and more influence, which is the soft skill and the leadership part.